Given that we have reached the final fortnight, and by that I mean 2 weeks exactly to the day
Great language.
left, fortnight means 2 weeks. What, medieval?
Sure, why not? I'm a medieval guy.
It's a good time to check in on where the race is. CNN's senior chatter reporter Harry Enten is ready to get medieval with us.
You're going to get knighted.
Yes. How close is this race?
Okay, so when we talk about a historically close race, oftentimes we talk about the national polling, but I wanted to try and dig into the state numbers to get an understanding of how close this race is. Holy cow, from a historical perspective. So what I did for all of the years going back since 1972 was I took a look at the final polls, and then I basically calculated out what the electoral map would look like and how high up would the leading candidate's electoral vote total get. And what we essentially see is right now the leader's electoral vote total is 276 electoral votes based upon the polls. If you go back since 72 and try and find the closest years, if you go back to 2000, which of course was a historically close election, at the end of the campaign, the poll leader's electoral vote total was just 281 electoral votes. That's where Gore was in the final polls of that campaign. You go back to 2004, George W. Bush was at 296 electoral votes. So based upon the polls at this point, we are heading into the election with the closest polls in the Electoral College that we have ever seen, at least over the last 50 years. It's stuff like this that gets me up in the morning. It gets me truly excited as a political sort of scientist.
This is a really interesting way to look at it. I never would have thought of this, but basically what the polls are showing right now, the polls.
Correct.
The closest race in terms of the electoral vote that we've ever seen.
Exactly
That's
right.
fascinating. All right, how about in the key states?
Yeah, how about in the key states? You know, it's not just when you tally up the electoral votes. Harris likely must carry 3 of these 4 states to win, and these are the states most likely to determine the Electoral College. Look at this. North Carolina, less than a point lead for Trump. Wisconsin, less than a point lead for Harris. Michigan, the exact same thing. Pennsylvania, the exact same thing. Basically, the 4 states that are most likely to determine this outcome are all within a point. And when we span this out to the Electoral College, what do we get? We get exactly this. Harris with that 276 electoral votes because she carries these Great Lake battleground states, right? But let's just say we flip Pennsylvania and the polls don't match the result exactly right. What happens? We flip Pennsylvania to red, and then we get Trump to 281 electoral votes, which is not really much of a long shot, given that at this particular point, the race in Pennsylvania is within a single point.
All right, you just showed those 4 states all within 1 point. David Plouffe, who's working for the Harris campaign, says all 7 swing states are within 1 point. Have we ever seen so many crucial states so close?
No, I went back since 1972. Have the final Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin polls ever been so tight? No, they have not. We have never had a year where any one of these states was within 1 point. And this year, John, all 3 of them are within 1 point. It's a historically close campaign, whether you look at the national polls or at the state polls, like we just did. And I think we just got knighted.
So you're saying it's close?
I'm saying it is close.
Harriet, and thank you.
Thank you, John.
With just 14 days until Election Day in America, let's bring in CNN political director David Chalian to tell us the one big thing they need to know today. David, what does that take away?
Well, you said it. It's 2 weeks to go until we count the votes. As you know, Sarah, more than 15 million people have already cast their vote in this election. The election is very much underway. But as voters are dialing into this race and prepare 2 weeks from now to watch, of course, right here on CNN, the vote returns unfold, it is important to take stock of where we are and what that means for when we'll know a result. And patience will be in order here. So just looking at the blue wall states, those 3 yellow battleground states you see there in the Great Lakes region, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. We know that in Michigan and Wisconsin, the big city population centers of Detroit and Michigan and Milwaukee and Wisconsin, they may not report all their vote until about 4 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday. Obviously, we'll need to see what that vote is to understand what the total state of play in those states are. So maybe no projection on Tuesday night from those states if it is as close as polls suggest. And in Pennsylvania, they can't even process the mail ballots until Election Day, until the polls open. And so therefore, Sarah, given that half the electorate may end up voting by mail, voting early, it's going to take a little while for folks in Pennsylvania to process, unfold, flatten, and count all those ballots. We may not have a result there until Wednesday, perhaps. So this may take a while, given the fact that David Plouffe, the senior advisor to the Harris campaign, Sarah, says some of these states are going to be decided by less than a percentage point.
Which is crazy. People have to be prepared for that. A lot of people nervous about that as well, how long it might take to get a result. Harris is now sitting down with NBC for an interview that will air tonight. She is also, of course, has a CNN town hall tomorrow, 9 p.m. with Anderson Cooper. What is she hoping to do with this and get out of this?
Her main goal in these final 2 weeks is to raise the stakes of this election in minds of voters. And I imagine that is what you're going to see her do. You noted, I think she's sitting down with Telemundo. She's sitting down with NBC News. And in each one of these interviews that she's doing, also going to do a CNN town hall tomorrow with us in suburban Philadelphia in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. Her main goal has been to draw a sharp contrast with Trump on every issue at every moment of the day. And I'd be surprised if that's not what comes through in these interviews she's doing today, because their goal is to remind voters of the negatives of Donald Trump, because we see in a lot of polling that a lot of voters remember the positive sense of the economy or of having more money in their pockets. And the Harris campaign believes a second Trump term could be far more dangerous, and they want to remind voters of that as they go into the voting booth.
We are in the final stretch, David Chalian. It feels like it came so fast. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
John.
thank you.
All right, with us now, CNN senior political analyst Ron Brownstein and Republican strategist and former RNC communications director Doug Heye. Gentlemen, Vice President Harris spent an entire day in the 3 blue wall states, a phrase I believe invented by Ron Brownstein. Nice to have you here. Yesterday with Liz Cheney, a Republican. The 3 most important states in this election, a whole day with just 2 weeks left. I want to play a little bit of sound from that.
I certainly have many Republicans who will say to me, I can't be public. They do worry about a whole range of things, including violence, but they'll do the right thing. And I would just remind people, if you're at all concerned, you can vote your conscience and not ever have to say a word to anybody. And there will be millions of Republicans who do that on November 5th.
So that was the message sent, Ron. And the question is, to whom?
Yeah.
Is it just Republicans, or is it a little more complicated than that?
Yeah. Look, I thought that was the message that was targeted precisely at the voters who are most available to her in the places where they are most available to her. If you kind of look at these 3 states that fell out of the blue wall in 2016 and Biden put them back in 2020, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, key to his improvement there was that he ran better than Hillary Clinton did in the big suburban counties, the 4 suburban counties outside Philadelphia, the WOW counties outside Milwaukee, Dane County, which is Madison, as well as Oakland County outside of Michigan, outside of Detroit. That's where she was. And in 2022, John, it's important to note the Democratic gubernatorial candidates generally ran better than Biden did. 2 years earlier, that was the first election after the Supreme Court rescinded the nationwide right to abortion. So, I'm just back from Oakland County myself. I think if you look at these places, they are the communities where Harris is most likely to improve on Biden's 2020 performance, particularly with college-educated white women, maybe also some of the non-college white women in those communities. And the Cheney appearances, I think, was precisely targeted to try to increase the permission structure, to slice away a few more points of those votes. Maybe some among people who identify as Republicans, but certainly among independent voters who have previously voted Republican, mostly on economic issues, but find Trump a threat to their rights, their values, and are receptive to the message that he is a threat to democracy itself.
Doug, to what extent are these the swing voters? The Haley voters, maybe from the primaries, who, by the way, weren't all registered Republicans.
Yeah. Look, you're talking about the same subset of voters, right? Some of them are registered Republicans, some of them are independent, and they're looking for, as Ron said, that permission structure to vote for Harris. But they also want to hear from Kamala Harris. So the events that Harris did yesterday with Liz Cheney speaks to some of their concerns, but these are the same voters who are saying to the Harris campaign, look, we don't like Donald Trump, but we know who Donald Trump is. Who are you, and what do you want to do? And I think that the real vulnerability for the Harris campaign here is that age-old question of the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. You always go with the devil you know. They know Donald Trump. They need to get to know Kamala Harris, and time's ticking on that.
I want to ask you, we just had David Chalian on, and all of us who've covered politics for a long time, we swear an oath every 4 years that we're not going to focus overly on the early vote, because one vote, today counts as much as one count on Election Day. But
Yes.
But there are some interesting things happening in Nevada, where they voted early for some time. Now, after 3 days of early voting, more Republicans have voted there than Democrats. This is not something that we have seen the last few elections. What is this a sign of? What are the possibilities here, Doug?
So I try and disregard early voting as well, even though I usually vote early. And look at North Carolina as well. We see Republican numbers are up, Democratic numbers are down compared to 2020. But I'm not looking at the Republican or Democrat numbers. I'm looking at the unaffiliated voters in North Carolina. And what are they going to do? What have they done already? And over the next 2 weeks, where are they? That's what's going to be what decides this election.